Welcome back to Mr. English Lab. This is the channel where we don't just learn English words and grammar. We explore ideas, stories, and reflections that help us understand life and ourselves a little better. Today's episode begins with a strange and powerful phrase, die before you die. At first, it might sound confusing, maybe even scary. How can someone die before they actually die? Take a moment to think about that. Let the words sit with you for a second. It sounds like a riddle, doesn't it? Something mysterious, maybe something you would find in an old poem or a piece of ancient wisdom. And that's exactly where it comes from. The phrase, die before you die, is found in ancient spiritual traditions. It was made famous by the 13th century Persian poet Rumi, who once wrote, "Die before you die, so that you do not die when you die." It sounds deep and poetic, and it is. But it's not really talking about death in the physical sense. It's not about fear or loss or endings. It's actually about freedom. What this phrase invites us to do is to let go, to release the parts of ourselves that keep us stuck, small, or disconnected from who we really are. It's about an inner death, not an outer one. It means letting go of the masks we wear, the stories we tell ourselves, and the identities we hold onto often without realizing it. Think of it like this. Have you ever felt the strong need to start over? Maybe after a breakup, after losing a job, or even during a quiet moment when you looked at yourself and thought, I don't even recognize who I've become. That moment, that quiet realization, is the beginning of what it means to die before you die. It's the first whisper of transformation. In many traditions, Sufi mysticism, Stoic philosophy, Buddhism, and even modern psychology, there is a shared idea. If you can face your fears, your ego, your attachments, and your habits while you're alive, you can experience a kind of rebirth. A second life. A clearer, lighter way of being. Why does this matter? Because most of us, if we're honest, live much of our lives on autopilot. We wake up, go through our routines, react to situations instead of responding thoughtfully, and repeat the same habits again and again. We chase approval. We try to fit into roles like the strong one, the nice one, the successful one. But at what cost? What happens when we hold on to those identities so tightly that we forget who we are underneath them? What do we lose when we're too afraid to let go of the person we think we're supposed to be? This episode is an invitation, not to die physically, of course, but to shed what no longer serves you. To question your old stories. To release what feels false or heavy. To ask yourself, are these identities still true for me? Are they still mine? As we go deeper, I'll share reflections, stories, and questions that might gently challenge the way you see yourself. And as always, I'll guide you in a way that helps you grow both in language and in self-understanding. So, are you ready? Let's take a step into the unknown together and begin the journey of dying before we die. The identity we wear, who are you really? Now, let's take the next step in this journey, a step inward. Before we can let go, before we can experience this inner death, we need to understand what it is we're actually holding on to. So, let me ask you a question. Take your time with it. Who are you? Most people, when asked that question, give answers like, I'm a teacher. I'm a father. I'm from Brazil. I'm an introvert. I'm a perfectionist. But are these things truly you? Or are they just labels, temporary roles you play in this short, beautiful story of life? Maybe you've said something like this before. I'm the kind of person who always puts others first. That's a common answer, and there's nothing wrong with it. These kinds of statements feel normal, even comfortable. They help us explain who we are. They sound familiar and socially acceptable. But if you look more closely, you'll notice something interesting. Most of these answers are not really about who you are. They're about what you do, where you come from, or how you've learned to behave over time. In other words, they're not your essence. They're layers, roles, labels, and descriptions that you've collected along the way. Some of these layers were given to you early in life by your family, your culture, or your teachers. Others you picked up later through your career, your relationships, or your life experiences. Over time, all these layers come together to form a story, a kind of self-concept, or an internal identity. It's the story you tell yourself about who you are and what you stand for. Now, that's not necessarily a bad thing. In many ways, identity helps us feel safe and stable in a world that can be chaotic and confusing. It gives us structure, belonging, and a way to introduce ourselves at parties or in conversations. It gives us something to hold on to. But here's where it gets tricky. Over time, we start to get attached to those roles. We start to believe that they are fixed, that they will never change. We begin to confuse the story with the self. We forget that these roles are just one version of us, shaped by a certain time, a certain place, and a certain set of expectations. Think about it for a moment. How often have you said something like, "I could never do that. It's just not me. I'm not the kind of person who takes risks." We say these things as if they were facts, but they're not facts. They're beliefs. Beliefs that we've repeated and reinforced so many times that we've stopped questioning them. And when we hold on to those beliefs too tightly, our identity becomes like armor. It protects us, yes, from discomfort, from uncertainty, from change. But it also traps us. We start to hide behind our job titles. We play our usual parts, the responsible one, the quiet one, the helper, the fixer, the achiever. We act in ways that fit the image we've built, even if that image no longer feels true. But here's the paradox. The same armor that keeps us safe also keeps us stuck. Because when we hold on too tightly to who we think we are, we close the door to who we might become. We limit ourselves. We say no to opportunities that don't fit our brand. We stay in jobs, relationships, or routines that feel empty, just because they match the identity we've built. So, let me ask you again, but this time more deeply, who are you really? If you removed all the labels, if you weren't defined by your job, your nationality, your relationship status, or your personality type, what would be left? That's where the real exploration begins. Because at the center of all this is something called the ego. Now, when I say ego, I don't mean arrogance or pride. I mean the psychological ego, the part of your mind that builds and maintains your sense of identity. It's the inner voice that says, "I am this. I am not that. People like me don't do things like that." It's constantly comparing, judging, defending, and trying to protect the image of me that it has built over time. The ego isn't the enemy. It's actually trying to help you survive. It gives you a sense of self, helps you navigate social life, and keeps you safe from danger. But the problem begins when we start to believe that the ego is all we are. When we forget that this collection of roles, habits, preferences, and memories is only part of us, not the whole truth. Because the truth is, the self is fluid. It's alive, always changing. You are not a fixed character in a rigid story. You are more like a river, moving, adapting, growing, becoming. You are not a fixed character. You are a dynamic being, always growing, shifting, adapting. Every day, in big ways and small, you are changing. And if we want to live with more freedom and authenticity, we have to stop clinging to identities that no longer serve us. We need to start exploring what lies beneath them, the deeper, quieter layers of who we really are. Now, I won't pretend this is easy. Letting go of an identity can feel like a small death. If you've always been the high achiever, who are you when you stop chasing gold stars? If you've always been the caregiver, who are you when you finally put your own needs first? If you've built your whole sense of worth on being the smart one, the strong one, or the reliable one, what happens when life humbles you, when you can't play that role anymore? These moments can feel uncomfortable, even painful. It's as if the ground beneath your feet starts to shift. But here's the good news. Something deeper always remains. Beneath all the surface roles and stories, there's a quieter self, a self that isn't trying to impress anyone, that isn't performing or proving anything. A self that doesn't need validation because it already feels whole. And that's what dying before you die is really pointing to. It's not about destroying yourself. It's about releasing the illusions you've confused with your true essence. It's about loosening your grip on the costume so you can finally feel the air on your skin. So here's a question to carry with you. What parts of your identity feel natural, and what parts feel like performance? Take a moment. Be honest with yourself. Because in the next step of this journey, we'll talk about what it means to truly let go, not to disappear, but to make space. Space for something more honest, more fluid, and more alive to emerge. The death of the ego. Not as dark as it sounds. Now that we've looked at the identities we wear, the roles, the labels, the stories, let's go a little deeper. What does it really mean to die before you die? What exactly is supposed to die? Here's where we bring in the concept of the ego. And just to be clear, when I say ego, I don't mean arrogance or pride, the way the word is often used in casual conversation. I'm talking about something more subtle and much more universal. The ego, in this sense, is the mental structure that we build over time to create a sense of me. It's made of beliefs, fears, memories, and social conditioning, all the thoughts and experiences that shape how we see ourselves and how we show up in the world. Now, the ego isn't evil. It's not some enemy hiding inside you. In fact, it plays an important role. It gives us a sense of continuity, a feeling that we are the same person from one day to the next. It helps us fit into society. It protects us emotionally and psychologically, especially when we feel unsafe, unseen, or out of control. You could think of the ego as a bodyguard. It stands in front of you, alert and ready to defend the version of you that it believes is acceptable, safe, and lovable. But over time, that bodyguard can become too protective. It starts to confuse safety with sameness. It whispers, "Don't take that risk. Don't show that side of yourself. Don't change, people might not accept you." And so we repeat old patterns. We hold on to our image, even when that image becomes a cage. That's when the suffering begins, when the ego stops serving us and starts controlling us. So, when we talk about the death of the ego, we're not talking about erasing your personality or losing your identity. We're talking about loosening your grip on the mental habits that keep you stuck. It means stepping back from the automatic stories that limit your growth and keep you reacting out of fear or defensiveness. It's like decluttering the mind, gently clearing away old assumptions and outdated beliefs that no longer fit who you're becoming. It's a quiet kind of dying, not a destruction, but a soft release. For most of my life, I carried a strong identity, the achiever. I was the person who got things done, the one who always showed up early, always delivered, always went the extra mile. On the surface, it looked like a strength. And in many ways, it was. That achiever mindset helped me set goals, build skills, and move forward in life. It gave me direction and purpose. But underneath all that drive was something I couldn't see at the time: fear. A deep fear of not being enough. A fear that if I ever slowed down or stopped performing, I would disappear. That I would lose my worth, my place, my identity. So I kept pushing. I worked longer hours than I needed to. I said yes to everything. I measured my value by how much I could do, how much I could achieve, how much I could prove. And I didn't even realize it, because the achiever had become so tightly woven into my identity that I couldn't imagine who I would be without it. But then life, as it often does, stepped in to teach me a lesson I didn't know I needed. I hit a wall. I burned out physically, emotionally, and mentally. I found myself exhausted, anxious, and disconnected. And in that uncomfortable space, something began to shift. Quietly, slowly, I started to see that the achiever wasn't my true self. It was a survival strategy, a role I had learned to play to feel safe, seen, and valued. It wasn't who I really was. Letting go of that identity wasn't easy. At first, it felt like a death, a loss of control, a loss of meaning. I felt exposed and uncertain, as if I had taken off a mask I'd worn my whole life and didn't know what face lay beneath it. But with time, I realized something beautiful. What I was losing wasn't myself. I was losing the pressure to always be someone. I was letting go of the constant need to perform, to impress, to earn my worth. And in that space, something softer, truer, and more grounded began to emerge. It wasn't the end of me. It was the beginning of a more honest version of me. This is what the death of the ego really means. It's not a dramatic explosion or some mystical experience. It's more like a long, gentle exhale. A quiet peeling away of old mental habits and emotional armor. What remains isn't an empty space, but a deeper sense of being. A self that doesn't need to perform or prove anything, it simply is. And here's where language really matters. When we talk about what no longer serves you, we're not talking about something bad or shameful. We're talking about beliefs, behaviors, and mindsets that once helped you survive, but now hold you back. Maybe it's the belief that you always have to be strong, or the idea that you're not creative, or the habit of judging yourself for feeling too much. These are not flaws, they're ego defenses. They're signs of old conditioning. And the good news is, they're not permanent. The ego is not set in stone. It's more like a costume, one you've worn for so long that you forgot it was just a costume. And once you see it for what it is, you can choose, piece by piece, to take it off. So if you're listening to this and thinking, I've always been the peacekeeper, or I've always been the independent one, or I've never been the type to take risks, ask yourself this. Is that still true? Or is that just what I've gotten used to believing? Because when we talk about dying before you die, we're talking about dying to those fixed identities. We're talking about letting go of who you thought you had to be, so you can discover who you actually are. It's not grim. It's not sad. It's deeply liberating. Because when you stop clinging to the ego's narrow version of yourself, you make room for something much wider, a life that feels more spacious, more peaceful, more alive. So, here's something to reflect on as we move forward. What identity are you still holding on to, not because it feels true, but because it feels familiar? And if you were to set it down, even for just a moment, who might you become? Quieting the inner noise. Let's take a moment to slow down. Not just in this episode, but in ourselves. Let's pause and breathe. Before anything can truly change, before we can let go, shift direction, or even see ourselves clearly, there's something we need to talk about. Something most of us live with every single day but rarely notice directly. And that's the constant stream of thoughts running through our minds. We all have it, that inner voice that never seems to stop. Sometimes it sounds like our own voice. Sometimes it sounds like a parent, a teacher, or that critical version of ourselves we met years ago. And it never really turns off, does it? It's always there, humming quietly in the background. Commenting, judging, worrying, comparing. It tells you what to do, what not to do, what others might be thinking. It replays old arguments. It rehearses future conversations that may never happen. It loops endlessly on what ifs. What if I fail? What if I said the wrong thing? What if I'm not good enough? That's what we often call mental chatter. And while it might seem harmless, just thoughts, right? Over time, that constant chatter starts to shape the way we see and experience life. It creates emotional tension. It fuels anxiety. It keeps us stuck in old patterns of self-doubt and overthinking. You've probably heard phrases like, get in your own head, or go down a rabbit hole. Both describe how easily our thoughts can spiral, how quickly we can become trapped in our own inner noise, often without even realizing it. Think about it. How much energy do we waste thinking about the same problem again and again, without ever finding a real solution? That's rumination, like chewing the same piece of gum over and over. The flavor's long gone, but we just keep chewing. And it's not just about regrets or past mistakes. We overthink future possibilities. We second-guess our choices. We worry about what others think of us. It's exhausting, but because it feels so normal, we rarely pause to ask ourselves, is this actually helping me? Now, don't get me wrong, thinking isn't the enemy. Our ability to think, reflect, and plan is one of the greatest gifts of being human. But when the mind becomes too loud, when it spins endlessly without awareness, we lose connection to something deeper. We lose our sense of presence. We miss the quiet aliveness of the moment we're in right now. So, what's the alternative? Do we try to stop thinking altogether? Not exactly. The goal isn't to silence the mind completely. That's almost impossible. The goal is to observe it. To create a little bit of space between you and your thoughts. Because when you can step back and watch your thoughts, instead of automatically believing them, reacting to them, or following them, you begin to experience a new kind of freedom. You realize that you are not your thoughts. You are the awareness that sees them. Here's a powerful question to reflect on. When was the last time I just noticed my thoughts without reacting to them? It sounds simple, but it's surprisingly rare. Most people, maybe most of us, have never truly watched the mind with curiosity. We're so identified with our thoughts that we often forget something essential. We're not the voice in our head. We're the one who hears it. And this is where certain practices become incredibly powerful. Not because they're trendy or spiritual buzzwords, but because they train us to relate to our thoughts in a new way. Take mindfulness, for example. At its core, it's simply sitting, breathing, and observing without judgment. Not trying to control your thoughts or push them away, but allowing them to rise and fall, like clouds drifting across the sky. Another simple but profound practice is journaling. Not the polished, Dear Diary kind, but the raw kind, where you spill your thoughts freely onto the page. When you do, something subtle begins to happen. You create distance. You start to see patterns. You begin to notice which thoughts are driven by fear, which ones echo someone else's voice, and which ones, if any, actually deserve your attention. And then there's the breath. Even something as small as pausing to take 3 slow, deliberate breaths can interrupt the mental noise and bring you back into your body, back into this moment. Because the breath is always here. Not in the past. Not in the future. Only here, now. The point of these practices isn't to eliminate your thoughts. It's to remember that you are not your thoughts. When you can see the mind without being pulled into every worry or judgment it throws your way, you begin to discover something deeper, a quiet space beneath the noise, a kind of inner stillness. And it's from that stillness that clarity, creativity, and true self-awareness begin to arise. You might start to notice how many of your thoughts are shaped by old fears, false assumptions, or unconscious habits of judgment. You might realize that the mind often resists change, not because change is bad, but because the ego feels safer when things stay the same, even if the same isn't making you happy. So here's a gentle challenge for the next time you feel anxious, overwhelmed, or mentally cluttered. Don't try to fix it. Don't try to think your way out of it. Just pause. Breathe. Observe. You'll be surprised by what begins to shift when you stop reacting and start witnessing. And maybe, just maybe, the next time your inner voice starts to spiral, you'll recognize it for what it really is, a well-meaning narrator, but not the whole story. The liberating power of letting go. Now, imagine this. You're walking through life carrying a heavy backpack. You've been carrying it for so long that you've stopped noticing the weight, but it's always there. Every step takes more effort than it needs to. And inside that backpack, it's not filled with food or tools or anything useful. It's packed with old fears, outdated stories, impossible expectations, and beliefs about who you're supposed to be. Some of it isn't even yours. It was handed to you by your family, your culture, your past. Now imagine, just for a moment, what it might feel like to stop walking and take that backpack off. That's what we're really talking about here, the liberating power of letting go. Because once you begin to see the mental and emotional patterns you've been holding on to, the identities, the inner narratives, the habits of control, you realize something profound. You have a choice. We have a choice. We can keep clutching those old identities and stories out of fear or habit, or we can begin to let them go. When we start to release them, what we usually discover is space. Not empty or hollow space, but room for something new to grow. Letting go is not weakness. Often it takes more courage and strength than holding on. And it's rarely dramatic. Most of the time it's quiet, small, unseen shifts that only you notice. It can look like this. Letting go of the need to control a situation you actually can't control. Dropping expectations about how your life should look by now. Releasing the pressure to always prove yourself, to always appear strong, successful, attractive, or perfect. When we stop clinging to these things, something inside us begins to change. Energy that was stuck in anxiety or overthinking starts to move again. The mental clutter clears. Emotional baggage lightens. And suddenly you can breathe more easily, not just physically, but emotionally and psychologically. I'll share something personal. A few years ago, it felt like everything I had built, professionally and personally, began to crumble. On paper, things looked fine. But inside, I was tired and empty. I was chasing success, meeting other people's expectations, checking boxes without feeling satisfied. Small tasks became overwhelming. I knew something had to change. But it didn't happen through one big decision. It came through surrender. I stopped trying to control every outcome. I stopped pretending I had all the answers. Most importantly, I let go of the image of who I thought I had to be, the person who always had it together and never asked for help. That surrender didn't make me fall apart. It gave me clarity. And from that clarity came a different kind of energy, one born of alignment, not pressure or perfectionism. Here's what I've learned. You cannot grow while you're clinging. Growth needs space and oxygen. When you hold tightly to certainty, control, or an old version of yourself, there's no room for transformation. That's why letting go can feel like a relief, even when it's scary. You're not losing power. You're releasing the belief that you had to force things to be okay. Look at how much time we spend trying to manage what's outside our control, other people's opinions, the future, the past. Or how often we stay in jobs, relationships, or situations simply because they are familiar, even if they don't serve us anymore. We cling because it's predictable. But remember, holding on is a choice, and so is letting go. So I invite you to sit with this. What are you holding on to that no longer helps you grow? It might be a limiting belief, a story about your past, or an identity you've outgrown. Or something subtler, the need to always be right, the pressure to be liked, or the fear of disappointing others. Letting go doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you stop carrying what isn't yours or what no longer fits who you're becoming. And yes, there may be discomfort. The ego hates uncertainty. That's normal. But beyond that discomfort is space, and inside that space is the possibility of a life that feels more authentic, more alive, and more whole. But beyond the discomfort, there is lightness. There is movement. There is freedom. This is why dying before you die is such a powerful invitation. It's not about ending your life. It's about ending the patterns, the stories, and the attachments that keep you from truly living. From showing up as your whole self. Not the self you perform, but the self you return to when the noise quiets and the masks come off. So as we move forward, start to notice what you've been carrying out of habit, out of fear, or out of obligation. And then ask yourself, what might open up for me if I gently put this down? Not everything you carry is yours to keep. Some things were meant to be lessons, not life sentences. Rebirth. Who are you without the mask? So here we are. We've explored identity, ego, the inner noise, and the courage it takes to release what no longer serves you. And now we arrive at the other side of that process, the part that isn't about loss, but about emergence. A quiet rebirth. But let's be clear, this isn't about becoming someone else. It's not about reinventing yourself in some dramatic, external way. This isn't a makeover. It's about uncovering what's always been there, beneath the surface, a truer self, a quieter self, one that doesn't need to perform, protect, or prove anything. A self that's been waiting patiently for you to slow down long enough to hear it. Here's a metaphor to hold on to. Think of a seed, small, ordinary, almost invisible in its potential. From the outside, it gives no hint of what it might become. But deep inside, something is alive. Before that seed can grow roots or reach toward the sun, it has to break open. And from the seed's perspective, that must feel like destruction. The protective shell cracks. The old shape dissolves. The comfort of containment disappears. But only because something new is ready to emerge. That's what this inner transformation really is, the death we've been talking about. The dying before you die. It's the seed cracking open. It can feel disorienting, raw, even frightening. But it's not the end. It's the beginning. What comes next is growth, not growth towards something artificial or forced, but growth into who you actually are, when you stop trying to be what the world told you to be. This is the moment of rebirth. Not in a dramatic, movie-like way, but in the quiet, consistent choices of everyday life. You begin to move with less resistance. You start to notice what feels true instead of what feels familiar. You listen more closely to your intuition. You reconnect with what gives you energy instead of what only gives you approval. And that distinction between energy and approval changes everything. Because the world often rewards performance. It celebrates masks. It applauds success, not always authenticity. But real freedom, real aliveness, comes when you choose authenticity anyway. But something truly beautiful happens when you stop chasing applause from the outside world and start listening to the quieter voice inside yourself. You begin to become more you. Not a version of yourself designed to impress people or fit into someone else's idea of success, but a version that feels calm, real, and fully alive. Words like resilience, authenticity, and transformation often sound like big, abstract ideas, but at their core, they all point to the same thing, the process of returning to yourself. Resilience isn't just about surviving hard times. It's about learning to trust that even after everything falls apart, something strong and beautiful can grow from what was broken. Authenticity doesn't mean saying everything you think or rejecting the world around you. It means choosing to live in a way that reflects your inner truth, to act, speak, and move through life in alignment with what feels real to you. And transformation, it's not about becoming a new person. It's about becoming more deeply, more honestly yourself. Sometimes people ask, if I let go of everything I've built, the habits, the labels, the identity, won't I disappear? And that's an understandable fear. But here's the truth. When you take off the mask, you don't disappear. You finally appear. You stop being the version of yourself that was shaped by expectations, by fear, by the need to fit in. And you start being who you've always been underneath it all. That's the gift on the other side of dying before you die. It's not about vanishing. It's about returning. A return to your real self, a self that's softer, but not weaker. Open, but not naive. Peaceful, but still alive and full of curiosity. A self that no longer feels the constant pressure to achieve, to please, or to perform. Instead, you start to live from a quieter, steadier place, a place where life stops feeling like a battle and starts feeling more like a conversation. So let me ask you, who are you when no one is watching? Who are you when you don't have to impress, perform, or protect? If that question feels hard to answer, that's okay. You don't need to figure it out right away. This journey isn't about fixing yourself. It's about slowly, gently meeting yourself, piece by piece, moment by moment. And sometimes, the most honest way to meet yourself isn't through effort or thinking. It's through quiet, through stillness, through nature, through creativity, through those small moments when nothing is expected of you, and you can simply be. And here's something beautiful to remember. The people who are truly meant for you, the ones who feel aligned with your energy, will be drawn to this real version of you. Not the version with the perfect resume or the perfect smile. Not the one who always says the right thing, but the one who is real, open, and present. Yes, this inner death, this letting go, can be uncomfortable. It can feel uncertain and even scary at times. But what comes after the rebirth is always worth it. Because you're not becoming someone else. You're becoming someone true. Someone whole. Someone alive in ways you didn't even realize you had been missing. Microdeaths and micro-rebirths in daily life. Now, let's bring this idea down to everyday life. You don't need a big, dramatic event to experience this kind of transformation. It can happen in small, quiet ways, tiny microdeaths and micro-rebirths that unfold every single day. Every time you choose honesty over pretending, that's a small death, the death of the mask. Every time you forgive yourself for a mistake, that's a small rebirth, a new beginning. When you pause before reacting in anger, a small part of the old you dissolves and a wiser, calmer part takes its place. When you stop chasing approval and start trusting your own inner guidance, that's a rebirth too. Transformation isn't one big event. It's a series of small moments where you release what no longer serves you and open up to what's real. Every time you let go of fear, comparison, or control, even just a little, you die before you die. And in that space, something new is born. Something lighter. Something freer. Something more like you. Now, if you're wondering how all of this, the inner dying and rebirth, actually shows up in daily life, you're not alone. Because transformation doesn't just happen in big, dramatic moments. It unfolds quietly, in small decisions, subtle realizations, and gentle shifts that often go unnoticed at first. I like to think of these as micro-deaths and micro-rebirths, the small inner moments when you pause, release, and begin again. They may seem tiny, almost invisible, but over time, they reshape who you are and how you move through the world. Let me give you a few examples, because these are things we all experience again and again. Maybe it's saying no to something that drains your energy, even when guilt whispers that you should say yes. That moment is a small death, the death of the old pattern of pleasing others at your own expense. But it's also a rebirth, the birth of a new boundary, a deeper respect for your time, your peace, your well-being. Or maybe it's changing a habit that no longer serves you. It might be as simple as taking a new route home from work just to clear your mind, or as challenging as letting go of an old belief that's kept you stuck for years. Each time you interrupt a familiar pattern and choose something different, you are practicing this dance of inner death and rebirth. Another example, offering a sincere apology. When you admit that you are wrong, it can feel like something inside you is dying, the death of pride, of the image of always being right, of the need to appear perfect. But that death makes space for something much more powerful, a rebirth of humility, honesty, and deeper connection. These moments of letting go may not look dramatic, but they're deeply transformative. They're about releasing control, softening your grip, and choosing awareness over habit. Each time you pause and ask yourself, am I reacting out of fear or acting with intention, you create space for change. And that question, how much of my behavior comes from intention and how much from habit, is one of the most powerful you can ask yourself. Because most of us spend so much of our lives on autopilot. We respond the same way we always have, not because it's working, but because it's familiar. But when you pause, even for a single breath, you give yourself the gift of choice, the chance to respond, not react. And in that tiny gap of awareness, real growth begins. Growth isn't always comfortable. It can feel awkward, vulnerable, even painful at times. But that discomfort is proof that something within you is shifting, that the old ways are loosening their grip. Every small surrender, every time you choose compassion over pride, patience over control, curiosity over fear, is a micro-death followed by a micro-rebirth. Think about the last time you caught yourself before reacting in anger and chose to breathe instead. Or the moment you asked for help instead of pretending you were fine. Those may seem like small acts, but they're the building blocks of transformation. They're quiet revolutions happening inside you. And the beautiful thing is you don't have to wait for a major crisis to start this process. You can begin right now, right where you are. You can start by simply checking in with yourself once or twice a day. Ask, what am I holding on to right now? What can I gently let go of? How can I show up just a little more fully, a little more honestly in this moment? Because life isn't made of grand turning points. It's made of small, ordinary moments that, together, create the rhythm of your becoming. When you practice these daily micro-deaths and micro-rebirths, you start to move through life with more ease, more presence, and more authenticity. You stop clinging so tightly to who you were and begin opening to who you're becoming. So, as we continue on this path, I invite you to start noticing your own small moments of letting go. Catch yourself when you're on autopilot and gently guide yourself back to awareness. Welcome the discomfort that comes with change, not as a sign of failure, but as evidence of growth. And most importantly, remember this process is ongoing. You don't arrive at authenticity once and for all, you return to it. Again and again. Each small death and each quiet rebirth brings you closer to yourself, to a life that feels lighter, freer, and more alive. There's no final destination in this journey. It's not about reaching a perfect version of yourself or crossing some invisible finish line. It's a lifelong process of showing up imperfectly and beautifully, one day at a time. Again and again, we meet ourselves, let go of what no longer fits, and return to what feels true. And what's fascinating is that this idea, this rhythm of death and rebirth, isn't new. It's been reflected again and again in the stories, wisdom, and traditions of cultures all around the world. It seems that no matter where or when people lived, they all recognized the same truth. Real transformation requires a kind of death. Not a physical one, but an inner surrender, a shedding of what's old so something new can emerge. Take, for example, the poetry of Rumi, the 13th century Persian mystic. His verses are full of fire and tenderness, filled with images of dissolving, burning, and awakening. He speaks of dying before you die, a call to let the ego's illusions fall away, to melt into love itself, and to remember that what dies in this process is only the false self. For Rumi, this death is not the end. It's the beginning of true life, a return to the light that was always within us. We can also see this same truth in Joseph Campbell's hero's journey, a framework that has shaped countless myths, books, and films, from ancient legends to modern blockbusters. In every version, the hero must face a symbolic death, a descent into darkness, an encounter with fear, doubt, or loss. It's only after that descent that they can rise renewed, changed, and wiser. Without that death, the story remains incomplete. Because it's in the surrender, in facing the shadow, that real growth happens. Buddhist philosophy offers yet another reflection of this truth. Its teaching of non-attachment reminds us that our suffering often comes from clinging to people, possessions, identities, or even ideas about who we should be. To be free, we must learn to let go. And this letting go isn't about losing something. It's about releasing what keeps us trapped. It's a daily practice of dying to old views, outdated fears, and rigid expectations, and being reborn into a state of openness, compassion, and presence. And this theme isn't just ancient or spiritual, it's deeply woven into modern storytelling too. Think of movies like Inside Out, where transformation comes not from escaping pain, but from embracing it, from letting go of the idea that happiness means avoiding sadness. Or novels where characters grow by facing loss, failure, or uncertainty, and in doing so, discover strength, love, or purpose they never knew they had. Across time, across cultures, across all the stories we tell, the message echoes again and again. To truly become who you are, something inside you must end. An old identity, an old story, an old way of being must dissolve so something more alive, more truthful, can take its place. So I want to leave you with a gentle question, one worth sitting with for a while. What story have you been telling yourself about who you need to be? Maybe it's the story of the achiever, the one who always has to succeed. Or the caretaker, the one who must always hold everyone else together. Maybe it's the story of the strong one, the one who never shows weakness or asks for help. Or maybe it's the story of the good one, who always says yes, even when it hurts. And ask yourself, where did that story come from? Did you choose it? Or did it choose you? Was it shaped by family, by culture, by the expectations of others? And most importantly, does it still serve you now? Because once you begin to see your own stories clearly, you gain the freedom to rewrite them. You can choose a new narrative, one that feels lighter, more honest, more alive. You can release the story of who you think you're supposed to be and start living the story of who you really are. That's the heart of transformation. It's not just about changing what you do, it's about changing the story you live by. And when that story shifts, everything else begins to shift too. In that way, this idea of dying before you die is not just personal, it's universal. It's a shared human experience, a thread connecting us all across time, language, and culture. It reminds us that to truly live, we must first be willing to let go, to surrender the old stories, and trust that what remains is enough. As we bring this episode to a close, I want to leave you with a thought, one that has gently guided countless seekers, thinkers, and ordinary people alike through their own journeys of transformation. The phrase "to die before you die" isn't about giving up. Far from it. It's about waking up. Imagine, just for a moment, that the ego, that busy, protective, ever-performing part of us, isn't something to be destroyed or feared. Releasing the ego is not about losing yourself. It's about expanding your sense of who you truly are. It's an opening, a doorway to a wider, deeper, richer experience of life. You're not disappearing. You're becoming more yourself. This shift is subtle but profound. Like a butterfly emerging from its chrysalis, you don't vanish when the old self falls away. You transform. You spread new wings. So here's a question to hold gently in your mind. What would change if you truly believed that nothing essential can ever be lost? That your true self, your core, your quiet center, has always been there, steady beneath the surface, beneath the stories, fears, and habits. When we live with that kind of trust, the fear of loss begins to soften. Change stops feeling like a threat and starts feeling like a doorway. We begin to see that every ending carries a new beginning. Every death contains a quiet rebirth. You don't have to have all the answers right now. The journey inward is ongoing, sometimes winding, sometimes smooth, and that's perfectly okay. Curiosity and kindness toward yourself will carry you far. As you move forward from this moment, keep asking yourself gentle questions. When was the last time I truly listened to my inner voice? How much of my life am I living with intention? What small death, what tiny letting go could I embrace today to make room for tomorrow's rebirth? Transformation isn't a single event. It's a daily practice, a rhythm of dying and awakening, of letting go and beginning again. It happens in the small choices, the quiet pauses, the courage to release what no longer fits and step into what's real. If this episode has stirred something inside you, I invite you to keep it alive, share it, write about it, sit with it in silence, or let it weave into your ongoing conversation with yourself. Because in the end, to die before you die is to live truly, fully, and deeply alive. Thank you for being here with me on Mr. English Lab. Until next time, keep exploring, keep growing, and keep coding your own story, one word, one breath, one moment at a time.